you so much, Milda, for being with us today and for sharing your expertise on sustainability events and on legacy. I'm sure many of you know Milda because she has been working in the events industry for a number of years, not just in the sustainability realm, but she also comes with an event planning background. She was previously with IMEX, so some of you may know Milda from her IMEX time. And what's really nice about Milda is that she has that understanding of where we're all coming from an event planning point of view. And she's also an expert on sustainability. And she has been involved in advising a number of our clients on their sustainability strategies. So I'd like to welcome Milda and also explain to you all that Milda is going to run through her presentation, but she will pause midway through because there's quite a lot of content there. So if there are some questions that you have, you can put them in chat and I'd be happy then to confer those on to Milda. And then we will do a Q&A session at the end as well. So welcome, Milda. And if you could all just mute yourselves, but we're really happy to see your faces while Milda goes through her presentation. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a kind introduction here. And I'll just start sharing the screen, making sure that that is all set and ready. And yes, I did mention already, I'm very, very happy to be part of this presentation, share what I know, also learn what I don't know. So feel free to challenge me with questions. I'm very, very open to answering those questions where it's coming on the chat or during the natural breaks that we will have within the next hour. So feel free to keep that in mind. And maybe a little bit of how we will schedule this throughout the next hour. We'll go through a few global and industry trends that we see within sustainability and events. I have prepared a bit more of a framework, which we call Hannuwa, and you will learn what that means in a due course, that helps us to structure the thinking around sustainability and events. And I'll go through the case studies, a few examples on how that has been implemented in different areas and different locations around the world as well through various congresses. So that's going to be our space of play. And before I go into that, maybe it's also good to understand a little bit more of where I'm coming from and where my expertise are probably most useful in this environment. I represent an organization called Global Destination Sustainability Movement. Some of you might be aware of the different areas where we work with destinations through our benchmarking tool, GDS Index. So we benchmark around 100 destinations on a yearly basis on their performance and impact in sustainability field. So anything from Sydney to Vancouver and all of the stops in between. Some of you live in those cities. So highly recommend you to check that. In the other part of our organization, we work with consulting pieces, and that is the events consulting, exactly the scope that we will talk about today. And our role is to challenge and empower people to have a different mindset and a skill set and a tool set while creating regeneration within the destination and the events. And within my personal role and personal scope there, I do work with complex congresses, whether they're coming from the association world, from the corporates, or from the governmental sectors, especially the ones that are in the multi-stakeholder environment. So those who are working on with stakeholders around will sympathize and understand how sometimes difficult it is to navigate that area. And we like challenging options. We like challenging destinations. It's one of those areas that I really enjoy, coming to a destination that doesn't really know sustainability yet, or coming with a client that would like to implement sustainability but has not done much of the movement. for me, it's really enjoyable to start that from scratch and see where that journey takes us to. So with that in mind, I'm also eager to learn, where are you in your sustainability journey? And maybe again, as we test it, we can use the chat for that. Maybe you could write 1, 2, or 3, depending on where you are in your journey on sustainability with your clients, or maybe with your personal journey. That will help me to assess who do we have in a room. There are ones coming out, ones and twos. Ones are still winning from what I see. So nice to see the beginners, and nice to see those who are skilled. Thank you. Nice. Good to know. And nobody's is being you're quite modest group, right? Nobody is claiming themselves as experts. And to be very honest, when I do this question in different groups, I also find myself as a skilled professional within this field. Sustainability within Congress environment or in general as a field is fairly new. And in order to be a super user or a super expert, we always need to find those new educational pieces and reinvent or relearn and be on the top of all the different measurement tools. So it's really, really hard to keep the expert level within the field. And I think we all have a potential to be within the skilled field. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being active here. And actually, at the second part of this tiny game, there are definitely more skilled professionals who came in to mention their level. That's great. So, without any further ado, let's get into those trends to see where we are in the world and why sustainability is actually important within this space. To kickstart, it's really a few trends from the last year, from this year, that I do see upcoming. And there are some facts that we cannot really deny anymore. It's much hotter in terms of the temperature where we are today. And we are on the path of 3 degrees increased by the end of the century. And the tipping point is really here. We are recording the warmest years, we're recording heat waves that we've never seen before. And that is just something that some of you living in different parts of Europe, or not only Europe, would definitely see that in day-to-day environment. And unfortunately, it is going to get a bit hotter, a bit wetter, and a bit wilder in different places. So especially those who I've seen, a few of you are based in Spain. Not that long time ago, the flash floods were happening there, and that's also one of the big worries that we have in the world. Not to mention the heat wave that just passed the southern part of Europe. So that is definitely here. We see it, we experience that. But sometimes we disattach a little bit from it based on the work that we do. I'm curious, what does it actually mean for us as event professionals? And based on the research that is done, what it really means is that the cost of producing the event will increase. The weather extremes will actually limit our options to have events at certain locations, or will reduce the time of event season at certain areas as well. And it will definitely at some point lead to the loss of different assets, and also will have an impact on the social and economic stability within some of the regions. Of course, it's a slow process. However, some of the countries will see that sooner rather than later. So again, a big picture that we can crystallize and see it on how it will impact our own day-to-day work life. And another interesting statistical moment that I've came across is that we're actually not as good as not as good anymore at reusing materials. According to the Circularity Gap report, only 7% of resources are actually coming from the secondary materials. So only those 7% are recycled, reused, or regenerated, which is a huge, huge gap from the same research on the very similar parameters done in 2018, which was 21%. So we see the results, we experience the results, but the question is, are we doing enough to really get out of this over consumerism or overproduction space? Some would mention the cost. And there are different ways of seeing costs in sustainability, whether it's investment or not. I do see it as an opportunity to lean on those costs that are actually cheaper. And just to pick one, solar energy, for example, by demand and by technology that is out there, the reduction of that price that we currently pay for solar or renewable energy, it's so much less than we happened to have 20 years ago. So there are definitely those pockets where we can make the most out of the changing pricing. And I really try to challenge that thinking that sustainability is definitely costing more. So with that in mind, I'm also questioning, how are we doing as an events industry in the sustainability space? I picked a few trends that might also trigger some of the thinking, and maybe consider where you are within your organization in that. Trend one that I see, and actually it's been picked up through the ICA Destination Canada survey, that 73% of event professionals indicate that sustainability is incorporated within the event planning. Something that I also see from the question that I just raised a few minutes ago. So there are beginners, there are skilled professionals here that are doing good things with sustainability. However, there is a contradicting trend that it's also out there, where we have the behavioral versus attitude gap, where the majority would have the attitude of doing something in the mindset. However, the behavior is very much lower in terms of that percentage. And I think this is also happening within the events industry, as we do have theoretical breakdown of the strategy. It's not always perceived within the actions, or sometimes we do these called feel-good initiatives that are not necessarily coming from the strategic approach of implementing sustainable solutions. We also see that there is a demand from the client to have sustainability criteria, and almost 60% of our clients globally integrate sustainability criteria within their RFPs. I'm sure some of you have already seen that within different requests from the clients. It's much more leading within the corporate environment, where it's pushed by corporate strategic approach on sustainability. However, I see the same from the associations that is being picked up depending on which sector as well. So we, as an industry, we also need to upskill ourselves and be ready to respond to those RFPs with sustainability criteria in mind in order to win business. So I think it's also a very interesting thought on how to be and stay relevant within the industry. The trend number 4 that I see, it's also skepticism. There is something that we call as sustainability fatigue at the moment. There is a doubt in the authenticity of sustainable products. There is definitely mistrust on communications. We will address that slightly later, making sure that we are not falling on those very common pitfalls when it comes to communicating sustainability. And I think our role within events industry is also to lead that transparent communication and be humble in mentioning what kind of initiatives we have, and also being very transparent of what we're working towards in future initiatives, giving the path and giving that journey to our clients and also the attendees of the events. There are some positive outcomes out of that. And we also know that a lot of respondents to this specific booking report from 2024, that people want to travel more sustainably. However, it doesn't mean that it always translates into positive actions. much less people, in this case 34% of respondents, say that they are being more they believe that being more sustainable in a destination that is not implementing sustainability practices feels pointless. So that's a huge demotivation for those who want to do more, and then they go to a destination that is not known or is not implementing sustainability. It feels pointless for them to do the same. And also we see a shared responsibility of 70% of those who remain within the mindset that they still want to leave a place that is better versus what they found. There's always a silver lining of the travelers recognizing that they feel their best version of themselves when they do travel and they do act more sustainably within the destination. So these are all slightly conflicting modes, and it's a collective effort from all to make it happen, whether it's the event owner, whether it's a destination attendee or the organizer. So that was a big picture of where I think we are in the world today. And we are being logistical, pragmatic people of our industry. I really want to bring some of the principles of regeneration and sustainability within the event mindset. With that, we have a few theoretical mindsets that we apply in every single Congress that we organize. And that is very much designing out waste and pollution. And that's only possible if we actually know what kind of waste we have. It also links to the productions and materials that we can use and probably increase that 7% that I have mentioned a few slides ago. Also designing our events for inclusivity and diversity, and with that in mind, regenerating through natural systems. So taking inspiration from the nature, taking inspiration from the surroundings, and how can we bring it back to the event environment, and also generating the social impact within the destination where we bring our events. That might be still a bit too theoretical for the world of today, especially when I put back my event manager's hat. It's still like, so how do I start, and what do I do with this, and what is a roadmap? So a few years back, together with GDS Movement, IMEX, and Marriott, we came up with the Hannuwa model, which is very much targeting the event cycle and the areas that each event would have to a degree, depending on the scope of the event and depending on the complexity. Hannuwa is a very strange word, but it has a very beautiful meaning. It's an old South African word that means gathering of good fortune through living in harmony with our natural environment. And I think when we do our day-to-day work, if we think about the large Congress, that harmony sometimes is disrupted. And here is the principles that we can think through in bringing that harmony to life. Starting with the ecosystem. We all need ecosystems in order to make the event happen. We also need to make the event happen with that ecosystem through the sustainability lens. Then defining and agreeing on our strategy, reducing or removing emissions, going through circularity process, regenerating through food, looking into the social impact, very important on measuring and reporting, and also communicating in a way that is suitable for our audiences and also for our suppliers. So within the next 15 minutes or so, I will go through each step with a different example or a mini case study that we've been implementing throughout different events in different parts of the world. And I will point out a few examples to you. Before I start that, I will pause for a second in case there are any questions, and I will pause again after we get to the right before the number 5. So you'll have some time to get your questions out there. But is there anything that any of you would like to make as a remark? Just now, I'll pause for a second. What's going on the chat? Nope, not yet. Well, feel free to interrupt if there is anything that comes to your mind. And I will start with the first one. Building the impact ecosystem. what I've noticed throughout the number of years of working in sustainable events, it's really the matter of the team and the matter of the shared commitment. So building that team, the partnership with key players, the destination, the venue, and your key suppliers is the key. Suddenly, that ecosystem becomes responsible for bringing the event together to the sustainability matter, and it becomes a joint team. It becomes a joint effort. It's very important to engage with this ecosystem as soon as possible, and also motivate them to be part of that, instead of coming up with a strategy and saying, this is our strategy, you have nothing to do with that, and I just want you to implement that. There are different ways of how to keep those stakeholders engaged, and there are beautiful results if we engage the stakeholders from the very, very beginning. Once we do have our stakeholders in place, we all need to agree on the strategy of things that we would like to achieve. I do have a nice example from ESCRS Congress and their sustainability strategy. So I'm not sure if there are any colleagues or extended colleagues of mine from MCI, but you most probably heard about, if you are, you most probably heard about ESCRS as a case study, as we've been implementing sustainability strategy, especially this one, for the last 4 years. And this is just an example of how it could look like. And it doesn't mean that each sustainability strategy of the Congress needs to be as complex as this one, where we look into the content, in the climate action, in the circular economy, and also diversity and inclusion on different parameters. It's a fairly complex strategic approach and the process to get there. It's one of the ways of doing that. We can also see a strategic approach as having a few key performance indicators, and we continuously work through those. We can also look at the strategy that would be linked with the Sustainable Development Goals and pick the ones that are the most suitable for event or for the organization that is behind the event and follow those through. So there are different ways of seeing a strategic approach, and there are different ways of reporting back, from the very basic to the very complex one. And what I'm showing now is a fairly complex model, but it's definitely possible if there is a commitment on the number of years. We can also look into the Hannuwa model and the third step of reducing and removing emissions. And this is a tricky one because we don't really know where to start. And I've heard it so many times that in order to remove emissions, we don't know how to remove emissions. It really works like an inventory list for any production or any factory space, starting with evaluation of what do we have, then setting some goals and pathways of where we can reduce, educating the team and optimizing some of the processes. In some cases, it also includes investment in some of the reusable or recyclable products that we know that the year one investment might be higher, but all the upcoming years where we can use the same product or the same material would actually come with a lower cost, which is the sustainability net finance breakdown that I like to do sometimes. And also sometimes requires rethinking. It's true that not every single event can be reduced or accommodated to have an online version for those who are traveling from very far. However, we can all implement some of the differences in transportations or packaging. And last but not least, I will mention communication again to the clients and the suppliers, as it needs to be managed carefully and with lots of repeated messages that are clear to the rest of those audiences. Number 4, it's going through circularity, and that's really back to materials. Circularity is very, very much connected to production, and these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves as the event owners or as event planners. What can we eliminate? What could be replaced? What can we recycle? Can we recycle? And it does vary a lot from one event to another. And that's exactly back to the place where we need an inventory list for each of our events to understand it. I have a nice example going back to ESCRS Congress. This is the specifics from Congress 2 years ago in Vienna. And we went through this inventory check. We actually listed down what kind of things we do have. We designed some of the waste out by either reducing the carpet aisles or prioritizing hired materials, and also seeing how can we give a second life to those materials that we have, and achieved fairly solid results where 50% of the waste was designed out. More than 90% of our production was made from hired materials, and 86% of the materials that we used across the Congress were reused or repurposed. So definitely with a strategic approach, there are different ways of how to make it happen. And it requires calculation, which I'll get to in a second. Circularity is also very much connected to the waste management system. And in many congresses, in many destinations, our venues are relying on the waste management system that it's available at that specific destination or a country. I would like to challenge that sometimes by implementing a clear, understandable, well-signed, posted waste management system for the delegates that nudges the responsibility, nudges the communication, and also brings the purpose of being aware that this waste needs to go somewhere. And if the delegate is not doing the job, or if first of all, if the event owner is not doing the job to educate the delegate and the delegate is not doing that job, we all share that responsibility to make things happen. So what really works in large congresses is making those waste management bins super visible and also very much targeted to what waste we are having. If we have a paper material, there's an icon of a paper material, and there is no question for any delegate of where it needs to go, because it's very easy to match. We came through the first 4 bits of the Hannuwa model. And as I promised, I'll take the tiny break from talking solo, and I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions or make any remarks. And if not you, maybe Angela has a question.
Yeah, Milda, I was just thinking, I think it's more a reflection of a consumer perspective. But when you have all the waste and it's perfectly directed like that, do you also check with the conference facilities that then when they conference is over, that they are managing it properly? And how do you, like, for instance, with cartons, and you've got like half drunk coffee cups? I mean, is there a process in some of the countries where they wash that out, or does it then just move into the normal general waste if it's not clean?
So what normally happens is that each large venue we work with, especially when it comes to larger congresses, they do have waste management companies that are coming and collecting the waste. That is a very good indication if we all understand how those waste management companies work by looking into the parameters of what they recycle. Sometimes it is a very much of the governmental decision what to recycle and what not to. And sometimes we have the power to implement something that would work for us because the waste recycling companies that are collecting waste have the capacity to do more recycling if we wish to, but it's not aligned with the country's ambition, because the country's ambition is lower. I'm talking a little bit in circles because I've seen too many examples in how it works. The key here is to learn what the destination can do, what the venue can do, and can we challenge that? And on your very specific question on what happens to, if we have packaging with waste and a material, it really depends on the country. I'm just about to finalize this waste management process for upcoming ESCRS Congress in Denmark, as we have it in September. The governmental rule there is that any material that had contact with food or water or any liquid automatically goes to the generic bin, which is a really, really challenging aspect of implementing sustainability, because we need to discover all of the flows that we normally have. We cannot have all the bins that we want to, because that is not going to serve the purpose. However, by knowing the system, we also know where the waste is going to, and it goes to incineration, which is a process where waste is being burnt, and different power plants are producing energy out of that. So it's not really a bad process, but unless we know what is that process within the country, we cannot really lean on that infrastructure without knowing. So I hope I answered the question. That the answer is super complex and we need to take it case by case, but there are different ways of working around it. And I don't want to discourage any of the event owner, of the event planner, or the organization not to search for those solutions, because they're out there. It's just a matter of rethinking and learning along the way.
Yeah, in one of our coffee shops, it's the one in Dublin Airport, they have a water a cleaning system at the end. So when you finish your coffee, you can wash it out yourself and then put it in the bin.
Amazing. That means it's recycling. Yes. So well spotted on small nudges, and it's definitely possible to implement it in some of the events. And ideally, we actually have events with solid porcelain china, where we don't even have to think about those materials, and we simply reuse it, rewash it, and continue using it for the next event where possible. Great.
Anybody, any other questions? You're welcome to speak, or you can put it in chat as you like. No.
We'll move forward in the meantime, and we'll get through the next ones. But if something comes across, please feel free to let us know. I'll move forward with the social impact part. And an example that I would like to share here, we're actually moving away from ESCRS example on this specific case, because I want to bring something that is, I think it's quite interesting. This was a ICA Congress back in Dubai last October. And we've been working together with Meet for Impact, and they are specializing in impact methodology for events. What I found it very interesting as an approach from Abu Dhabi, and also ICA as the event organizer, is looking deeper, not only into the operational mindset of sustainability, but also using the international event to upskill the local environments and the local organizations on sustainability, and actually bring that impact. We've seen challenges within our research there, and there was a lack of sustainability and impact in the supply chain. There was definitely, and still there, a negative environmental impact of the Congress, right? We know that there are challenging areas of resources within the UAE environment, and lots of materials are being shipped from around the world. So knowing all these challenges, we've created a strategy together with the destination and the event organizer and the supply chain. And we actually came to really interesting results, because what we really wanted to focus on is to increase education, improve the innovation aspects, and also create the leadership, or at least plant the seeds of the leadership when it comes to sustainability and impact within the business events industry. And we focused a lot on education, where, you know, big numbers of students see themselves in the business events industry as their career choice, because we took the time to educate them. We look at the ambassador program, where they build meaningful connections. And then we also look at the supply chain, and the fact that different suppliers went through this program of implementing sustainability for an event as ICA Congress. We also see that they are educated within this field. And also the industry professionals are committed to being part of the business events and making their connections work and meaningful within the young generation. So it's a much bigger space, a much bigger thinking than operational sustainability. And it does require maturity within the organization. It does require also maturity in terms of the thinking of how to implement that. So again, not to disencourage, but it's probably within the complexity of it all, it's one of the last stages that we want to implement within sustainability and impact within the event. What we really want to focus on when it comes to measurement is start tracking. And this is a very, very important piece, because measurement and reporting, regardless to what kind of initiatives we do, is the most important piece of it all. We don't know how good we are at anything if we don't know how to track it and we don't have the data to understand it. Some of the events might think that they are doing really not great within the industry, but how do we know that? Only by tracking. And it doesn't have to be as complex tracking. It can be tracking over a few specific parameters. I'm currently showcasing a few graphs from a tool called Trace. It's one of the key players at the moment in terms of measuring sustainable events methodology in terms of carbon footprint. I like the tool. I think it's great when it comes to specific event measurement tool. I'm sure a few of the PCOs around are using that for their own events. It's tailoring events carbon footprint, which is not the case with some other tools that are more generic. So that's a unique example of that. And also, we don't have to measure everything. We can choose what we measure. If we want to focus on waste, then we focus on waste. If we want to measure the food carbon footprint, we do that. If we have capacity and the environment where we want to measure the holistic approach of the carbon footprint, we can also do that. So there's, again, the ambition is really dictating where we can make that influence. And this is probably one of the most comprehensive slide of 32 different tools that are out there that are suitable for carbon footprint calculations within the events industry at the moment. And they are as complex as Trace or Climate, which in my opinion are probably the leading tools. And then there are anything in between when it comes to medium to the basic level, where we have less comprehensive reports, but also less comprehensive administrative measurement approach there. So check it out. Maybe some of the tools are already familiar, but if there is one place where I would recommend to invest some time in, is to understanding the measurement, because that really defines your path on how to move forward, as there are many different nuances when it comes to reporting. And before the ending of it, I just want to make sure that we also cover the communication. There is a lot of communication that is happening about sustainability, and sometimes we see it very solid, or sometimes we see it into this sustainable area where things are vague. It's no longer enough to add sustainability or product being sustainable without knowing that it is. And there are so many different terms, especially for those who are living or not living and breathing sustainability. There are so many confusing terms that are out there and misused at this point. So if any of the terms, I would like to bring to and maybe just clarify the difference between carbon neutrality and net zero. I'm sure many of you heard the net zero as a term, and not sure if everybody understands the difference there, and it's a huge difference. So carbon neutrality is when 100% of all of the emissions and all of the efforts that are made during the event, we simply purchase the carbon credits to offset that. So it's 100% offset. It gives us a balance of neutrality. When it comes to net zero, it's a strategy. It's a strategy in place to reduce emissions by 90%, and the remaining emissions are removed. And it does require long-term targets and strategy in order to get there. So if we look at the linear timeline journey, majority of the events do start with carbon neutrality, not only events, actually, organizations too, and lead into the net zero. And there's a massive, massive difference between that. And that's very important in communication, which also brings us to a few spots of how to communicate it. Things like eco-friendly practices are probably not exactly explaining us what does it mean. So if there is any way to avoid that or explain what that eco-friendly practice is, that's probably a better option. The cruise ships are zero waste. I've seen that in many publications. By default, a cruise ship is never a zero waste, and that is definitely not the approach. Just going to pick another one that is probably more sufficient for hospitality, but all of our hotels are certified with our own eco label, which also is a massive conflict that the label is managed and certified by the same organization that is claiming to be certified. So these are just like very common pitfalls that I would like to point out when it comes to communicating sustainability. It's sometimes easier to keep the less ambitious communication, but be very precise. What do we all mean by that? And it requires a bit of the skill set on how to make those messages clear. And with that, we got through all of the steps of the Hannuwa model with the ecosystem, with the strategy, with removing emissions, circularity, with social impacts and food and the measurement and the engagement in communications. And for the last finish, before I open again for questions, I just went to a different event that was actually targeting for sustainability events consultants. So exactly the audience that that is doing a similar job to what I do. And we came back with 5 tips that would really signify and really make it clear in my mind, and hopefully in your mind, well, what does it mean to implement sustainability globally? And it really starts with local understanding, and it's especially for those who are organizing global events and going to some exotic destinations. Sustainability in Europe means a very different thing than sustainability in India. Early engagement equals better data. That always works. Tracking what you can, influence what you cannot track. That's also something that really is proven to be a key within this process. A universal sustainable venue doesn't exist. There are different areas, different challenges and different opportunities to work with venues. And also focusing on the culture and consciousness when it comes to catering. That is a very important and a great lesson, especially working in areas like Middle East, like different countries in Asia. Catering is perceived very differently there, and there are many cultural aspects there where the traditional sustainability measures do not always work. So keep an eye on that and make sure that it's within your mindset as well when you organize your next event. And with that note, I'll actually stop sharing the screen so I can see you better.
Super. Thank you so much, Milda.